Grab your popcorn, people. This is gonna be a long one. Welcome back to Royal Autopsy, my friends. A series where I take a moment to rave and rant about games I have played, whether they be recent or old. I think it is safe to say that the past year of Monster Hunter has been a roller coaster for many. Yeah, Iceborne came to a conclusive end with the likes of Elatrion and Fatalis kicking everyone's asses. Stories 2 not only comes out despite the middling sales of 1, but manages to earn triple the sales in just the first few months of release, with more on the way. The animated special Legends of the Guild getting both a release date after years of silence, as well as a release on Netflix. And then there's Rise. What? You are saying I forgot about something else? Nah, I don't see anything else on the checklist. If there was something else on the list, I would have had to have cared about its release. But there is a reason you all clicked on this video. So let's just clear the air and address the elephant in the room. Monster Hunter Rise, aka Infinite Twitter Drama. What started out as a promising journey, handcrafted by the team of Portable Third, a beloved game for many who got to play it, as well as other titles in the series like Generations, transformed into a maelstrom of opposing voices upon its release. Loads of fans praised the accessibility of the game, the snappy combat, monsters, and aesthetic. Meanwhile, many others were massively disappointed in the longevity of the game, difficulty, game mechanics, and more. Even now, 5 months after release as of the time of scripting this portion, and you can still see people going at each other's proverbial throats. To say that Rise might just be the most divisive game release yet in the series is the understatement of the century. And now look at what I'm doing, throwing even more oil into the raging wildfire. This is gonna be good. Real talk though, this video has been planned for a long time now, ever since the game first came out. None of this is for the sake of kicking a dead horse just to stir up some attention, but rather to talk about my perspective on the game, flaws and all, and have a conversation. I don't think debates in the Monster Hunter community, hell, any community, should be shut down just because it might have negative connotations. Forcing a only good vibes bubble around a game kills discussion, and restricts the capacity in which we can not only talk with each other, but also create reviews criticizing a game and its flaws, talking about how they might be fixed. In short, I'm not gonna hold my punches with the game, and I don't think anyone else should, because at the end of the day, and above all else, I want to emphasize that I do this because I love Monster Hunter. We love Monster Hunter! So be that friend that has to smack some sense into the buddy next to you for the dumbass things they just did, because any relationship ain't good without it. I've waited long enough for the dust to settle. Best to not wait any longer. Let's get on with the show! Our first act of the night, and Rise already gives us the main showstopper, the lion of the circus, if you will. Because make no mistake about it, the combat, movement, and options given to the player is the best yet in the main series, hands down. I don't think anyone can disagree with me there. Weapons feel better than they have ever been prior, with loads of adjustments even compared to World and Iceborne. Customizable options for some of the moves like that of Generations, Hunter arts, and styles, and overall are incredibly tight. 2 weapons that, to my mind, especially highlight this change the best would be the Gunlance and Switch Axe. Gunlance for being the most stupid fun bullshit it has ever been. thanks to degeneracy like the space program, manual rocket blasting, different effects shelling has on the worm stake, and even something as simple as actually blocking while charging up the wyvern fire. Meanwhile, Switch X gets the highlights for, of course, having some incredibly fun switch skills like other weapons, but also for a mechanical difference that I really like. As much as I liked it in Iceborne, I will admit personally that I do think the sword mode played too important of a role. It was the mode where you have the most damage, has incredible spammage when combined with items such as temporal, and just overall had too many advantages in comparison to the axe. Which is a damn shame because of how cool a lot of these combos were, switching between both modes with wild abandon. Well, now, Rise puts a heavier focus on maintaining a balance between the two, while also giving some perks to each. Sword is still incredibly damaging with its discharges and pops, especially with the soaring wyvern blade technique. But now, Axe also has some great mobility thanks to the dashing draw attack, good power, as well as gaining the discharge pops when the sword gauge is charged up. The biggest change by far. Combined with still solid sound design as well as good impact, and the Switch Axe ended up as one of my favorite weapons in the game to use, as well as the preferred option I took for my fights against both forms of Narwa. Other weapons, of course, had some really good changes. Sword and Shield as an honorable mention for going back to a more old game style of control, which, thank you, I greatly prefer compared to Worlds, as well as of course Law and Sword's free fucking counters and insane damage. But these two stand out rent-free in my brain for the fun they brought to the experience, highlighting the peaks of this game's combat. And we all owe our thanks with this game's combat to the incredible wire bugs. In addition, that not only feels way more natural with the game than with Iceborne's Clutch Claw, but also expands upon the verticality focus of the past generations since Tri. It is absolutely crazy how much freedom and movement this game gives you with just 2 wire bugs, allowing for so many unique tricks and ways to get around. Hanging, dashing, wall climbing, soaring, and even use in the combat with the aforementioned switch skills and wirefall. However, a mechanic such as this would be called a mere gimmick if it didn't also bring an expansion to verticality into the areas. And I gotta say, all of these areas are extremely solid, not a single bad one I can think of, with interesting newcomers to the series such as the daunting shrine ruins, haunting Frost Isle, and immense lava caverns, and the return of old fan favorites like the arid sandy plains and the torrential flooded forest. The latter two especially provided the strongest reaction from me, seeing and re-experiencing these maps that I practically grew up with, and looking at all the ways they've changed and stayed the same.
You can! I bombed it open!
Wait, what? Where are you? Where are you?
The front. The thing, the thing that you can try to get in. You bombed it open.
You can bomb it
I haven't
open?
done this yet. You can't, there are bombable things.
What?
What is this? Relic record. What is this?
What the fuck? The endemic life scattered around also make for a unique incentive to learn the map, both to know where they are and potentially take photographs of them, and also to create paths of travel between you and the monsters, all while gaining supplies. The elemental beetles especially get a thumbs up from me for bringing in even more mechanics from Frontier, mainly the Transcendence state, into the main series. Fuck yeah. The last point to be talked about here that is connected to the gameplay, the monsters. As a whole, Rise has probably the most consistently good roster of monsters so far, with only a few bad ones, and maybe like one mediocre addition of the new cast. The rest, however, are extremely solid, particularly the new ones introduced in this game, such as Aknasam, Tetranodon, and Bishaten. Some of these additions, such as Gosharag, Magna Malo, Rachna Kadaki, Crimson Glow Valstrax, and the Narwas, even stand at the top of my mind as not only some of the greatest fights in the game, but also best new monsters introduced in a bit. Which is saying something, considering not only this game's roster, but also the past few games, introducing bangers like Basil Goose, Otogoron, and basically all the Fated 4, just to name a few. That's about it when it comes to the gameplay positives, but there are still a few other things I'd like to touch upon before getting to the main course. First, and an immediate positive for many, the weapon designs. Many people have been relieved to know and see that the gear in Rise doesn't follow the same unfortunate fate as Worlds, to be relegated to bone and iron reskins. Which, to give the devil his due, I get what they were going for. The whole intent with this philosophy was to make it so you felt like you were truly making the weapons you know and didn't know, unleashing more of its potential each step of the way. From simple bone and iron weapons, to the same base with parts attached on, and then finally the unique design. The problem with this philosophy, however, came with the fact that oftentimes it was incomplete and half-baked. Many of the monsters did not receive equal treatment, much less the same monster across various weapon types. And those that did consistently get unique designs or realized this philosophy were monsters like the ecosystem Apexes, Elders, and DLC. Fortunately, most of the monsters get their chance to shine and rise, with the return of a lot of fan favorites, and even some new designs for old monsters. And I say most because, regrettably, monsters that debuted in World like Kuliaku, Puke, Tobikadachi, and even fucking Basil still have these slap-on designs when fully upgraded. Puke especially is a weird case because with some of his weapons, they do give a new design to it, but it's only a new base. Huh? So yeah, I'm still going to give partial flack to that, even if the problem for the most part has been fixed. Presentation-wise, the game is solid. I won't say excellent because I do think there are some textures, weapons, and parts of the game that don't look the best they could have. But for the franchise's first spin on the RE engine, a really powerful engine put on the Switch of all things, it is pretty impressive. Some monsters like Zenogre with his enraged charge state, Magnamalo's dragon install, and basically all of Inarwa's attacks especially you can tell had a lot more care and effort put into them compared to, say, Regane in his entirety. Fucking ketchup arms. Are we being serious here? You could say this point is a bit of a mixed bag that varies, but when it is good, it is pretty good. If you weren't a fan exactly of World and Iceborne's villages, the tone, as well as the people there, then the village of Kamura might just be more up your alley, offering up a much more lively and welcoming feel to you and your journey. The word I would use to describe Kamura Village is joyous, where despite the inevitable destruction and challenge the rampage holds, the flame of hope still burns bright in the heart of its inhabitants, with no doubt about you being the one to get it done. A big factor that contributes to this feel would be the Kamura Song of Purification. A song that, while it can be replaced with any song you choose, shows the tip of an iceberg containing an amazing soundtrack. Remixes like that of Flooded Forest, Sandy Plains, Basil Goose, Volstrax, and Zenogre breathe new life into established domains, while original compositions like the Frost Isle, Rampage, Apex Theme, Infernal Springs, and all of the Serpents utilize the vocal focus of Rise's OST to its fullest extent. Main series wise, I think the soundtrack is just below Free Ultimate in terms of bangers, though that isn't to deny tracks like that of Limitless Courage from Iceborne being near the top. Four pages in, out of 18. Welp, you know what time it is. Yeah, you are looking at the video length correctly. That ain't an error. In my efforts to point out all of the complaints I have with the game, I never realized just how massive the list is when put into writing, especially combined with my tradition of long-ass explanations. Goes to show how much this matters to me, I guess. If we are to continue that analogy from earlier of aspects like the gameplay being the lion act at the circus, then this is where we start delving into the accidents and faulty construction. Case in point, pull number 1, the flimsy story. Rise's story stands out for me so much as one that had some good ideas going, but ultimately botched it more than any other Monster Hunter in terms of execution. Or the lack thereof, I should say. This isn't a case like Generations where they don't focus too much on it because its priority is first and foremost as an anniversary title, or like with World's handling of Zora and Nurg. Rise just straight up has a lack of execution throughout, connected by minute threads that are barely able to support it. The story is extremely underdeveloped, with some good ideas in there, mainly pertaining to the duty of the people of Chimera and what they are needed for, but it all generally either goes nowhere or isn't given enough time to breathe and develop before they are forced to conclude. Within the span of one village rank, you mean to tell me that Iori and Yomogi just naturally off-screen, with no big forced talking scene like World and Iceborne did on multiple occasions, come to the same conclusion without showing me the stages of their development? Much less the fact that any dialogue that could pertain to this beat in the story can be incredibly easy to miss, so you might not even know. Show, don't tell is a key principle in storytelling, you know? And then there's Magnum Malo. Oh, God. I thought Nurg and Zora had it bad with parts of their build-up, but now here comes Magnum Malo with a Sergio special of little build-up, quick encounter, but somehow worse. Magnum Malo first appears in the story after the Rampage tutorial with an Arzuros within its grasp, seeing us as a potential snack for it to feast on. We barely escape, even though I feel the hunter was being way too slow for dramatization's sake, and the Magnum Malo leaves us to chase after the fleeing Arzuros. Okay, not a bad introduction. Plenty of other flagships use this power gap strategy to make them feel like a big deal. From there on, using the rest of the story and your interactions with it to build upon that base. So, when do we next encounter it? You're kidding, right? So, not only is there no middle stage encounter, no repel quest, no second serving of Magnum Malo, no key quest involving him invading a rampage because that's his whole fucking deal, but you also end the village story 4 stars in? A point that in every other game to make you fight the flagship as the urgent, Polday, it's not the true culprit in the case of Lagiacrus, Velk, and even Nurg, or a fake out like with For's Gormagala and it's not truly being dead. You could have easily had the urgent be a second rampage involving him invading to show how big of a deal he is. Give more tension to the subplot of the trap, maybe make it not work according to plan, and then save the true Magnum Malo fight for 5 star, where within that very tier in the game, monsters like Gos Harag are still being introduced with cutscenes. But nope, cue credits in fucking 4 star? I'll at least give Sergios this. He tries to stay relevant to the story after that fight with him, even if it is early. He shows up multiple times, not only as an invader throughout, but also as the focal point of multiple cutscenes, one of which being the Sergio Swarm and the Frenzy-infected Apex, which then leads into the story-based Urgent. And you want to know the worst part about all of this? That recommendation I make of the Rampage invasion does happen, but only in 7-star Rampages with this red text filter. An invasion that, even with the red 7-star, is chance-based, and also had to be added into the game in version 2.0. How the fuck is something this important for your shitting flagship not in the story or in the base game? People, this isn't a case like with Zora, where it was this incredibly hard monster with so many concepts behind it that took over a year of world's development to even get working. This is straight up the team not thinking a feature like this was needed in the story or base of the game. Basically shooting this monster that supposedly was wanted to be done for a long while now, according to interviews, directly in the foot of his core features. And this is all just the village I'm talking about. The hub story is also extremely strange, as they try to do it like that of the older games, where the two campaigns were separate, yet also want to try a little bit of World and Iceborne in there, and have the hub and village to be connected or a basis to do the story quests in. This mixed have their cake and eat it too approach ends up making the flow between the two modes feel off balance and awkward to get into, trying to feel like it has an overall effect on the other, yet simultaneously doesn't, because you can totally do all of the Gathering Hub, kill the Allmother, and yet still have the Rampage happening and Magnamalo feasting, even though it is supposed to be over. It all feels very loose. Speaking of the serpents, the Gathering Hub story does not do a great job at explaining or even hinting at their capabilities or how they cause the Rampage. The most you are given is that Ibushi, the simp, is searching for his queen Narwa so that they can have babies and wipe the land clean so that they can have a safe place for them. That's a good motivation basis, and from there can be expanded upon into how they are doing so for the rampages or effect on the environment. But nope, all of that is left to either extremely vague hints or speculation by the player. And if this was a mystery kind of setup where figuring out the why and how was a key focal point, that could work. But it isn't. The focal point of a story instead is...
Oh boy, we barely held off that rampage.
When will it all end? Oh no, what is that?
I've never seen that one before.
Moo Queen.
Okay, so yeah, no, that thing we saw. We are pretty sure that is the thing causing the rampage and we need you to kill it.
The rampage is at last over, but no wait, it isn't, because Arachna Katki is in the lava caverns.
Surprise, Hunter. I also communicated with a different serpent like my sister, and this is the queen it was talking about. You have to go deal with it.
At long last the rampage is over, but still there is no sign of Narwa's body.
Oh, what are they doing down there?
Moo Queen.
Moo King.
Oh, for fuck's sake.
Okay, so, after somehow knowing that the serpents are causing these past few elder sightings, we've discovered their location and we need you to deal with it. We believe in you.
Thank you, dear Hunter. You truly are Kamura's flame of hope.
Gigantic oversummarization, I know. But that's all the Gathering Hub boils down to. And without a focus on the mystery, these revelations of it causing the rampage, the apex monsters, as well as how or why, is left to the briefest of explanations or to the audience to figure out something because, oh, I don't fucking know, the storms and presence of the two Mons make other creatures go mad, thus causing the rampage. And they just somehow have the power to make deviants, but not actually. Which is extremely disappointing considering that at one point, they toy with an angle that, if approached, would have been extremely interesting. When talking to Minoto after the Ibushi fight, you get hints that Minoto seems out of it, or not herself. When the knowledge comes to light that she communicated with the other serpent, she doesn't respond with fear or hatred like she did with Ibushi. She seems ecstatic, happy to know that she isn't overshadowed by her sister's natural ability to be empathetic, finally having something that in one aspect makes her equal to her sister Hanoa. Combine this with brief glimpses you can get of Minoto trying to draw in the hub, only to give up and store the paper in shame, as well as the confirmation that it is her that draws those shitty meme pictures you've probably seen, and you could perhaps get the angle that Minoto in some way has an inferiority complex. A complex rooted in the knowledge of Hanoa being the star of the village and everything she is not, with a talent of empathy, being unable to stand out in a way that gives Minoto worth, stuck in a job just like any other hub quest giver. No special talent she has to help out Kimura or the hunter with the rampage efforts. And here she is, finally feeling special, knowing she too also has empathetic powers with the other serpent. Sure, I could be digging too heavily into all of this, but the idea is there and present in the game. And I think that if this was given more development, a bigger focus in the story centered around the relationship between the twins, it would have been really fascinating to see tackled and would add something unique to the narrative. Now, having gone through that whole spiel, as well as considering my track record, I'm sure some people will immediately come to the counterpoint that I shouldn't put this much attention on the game's story, that the story doesn't matter and that it is useless to think about it too hard. Whilst yes, I do agree that the story is not the main focus of Monster Hunter, to say that it does not matter is a lie. For if it truly didn't matter, then why does Capcom keep including it? If it was inconsequential to the game, why don't we just go from one monster to another without any breaks? Why do they keep making entire trailers focused around and named after the story? Why do they keep putting effort into it? Why do they hire voice actors to be a part of the game? Why do they create entire characters, villages, and monsters based off this story? This case with Monster Hunter is very much like that of the fighting game genre when you think about it, where any attempt to be critical or talk about the story is met with, it doesn't matter because X is a fighting game first and foremost, when certain fighting games have not only taken the active endeavor to feature full-on story campaigns as well as tools to assist players, but the existence of a story in the first place creates the world, setting, characters, and foundation for everything else in the game. The story in a Monster game can actively inform decisions on location, monster roster, new mechanics, characters, villages, and more. TLDR, I know we all have the joke that story doesn't matter in a Monster game, yet here we are, also the same people that praise For You's story. So which is it? Now on to a bit of a spicy take for many. We need to talk about Rise's difficulty and the very strange flow of it. Haha! Thought I was gonna say easy, huh? I sure got you there! No, but for real though. While I can certainly agree somewhat about certain areas of difficulty, it is more complicated than just a stigma of being too easy. Game Design 101. Every game out there has what are referred to as difficulty curves. The idea that as you begin and play through the game will gradually adapt to your experience and throw in harder challenges to scale with you. A good difficulty curve lets players get a handle on the game, learn the mechanics, and ultimately evolve with every step forward they take with more complicated areas and bosses. Bad difficulty curves, however, do occur, generally as a result of difficulty spikes, sections within a game that bump up the difficulty drastically compared to everything you have experienced and maybe even what you'll experience afterwards, or alternatively, feeling unfinished or unbalanced. And like a lot of things in Rise, it is definitely the latter. Let me word it like this. Due to the way in which World, Iceborne, and Rise are being handled as games, with roadmaps after the final boss, the difficulty curve needs to continue at a balanced rate until it can end at a point that feels like a natural conclusion. From Xeno to the crossover monsters and their extreme versions. From Shara to the Mount Everests that are Elatrion and Fatalis. However, due to the patchwork state Rise released in and the following 2 updates, the situation is much different. In any other case, any other circumstance following what has been established prior, Allmother would be a fantastic springboard for future monsters, event quests, and escalation. But unfortunately, Allmother and Crimson Glow Volstrax, despite being really great, challenging fights, are title update monsters. And thanks to the Vegas fuck roadmap schedule given by Capcom, where for the foreseeable future it is just event quests, there's no confirmation on what is next or where it shall go. Combined with areas of the game like Village being by far the easiest it has ever been, with monsters having the HP equivalent of wet toilet paper, and then sudden spikes like HR Magna, Gauss, and the previously established Allmother and Volstrax, who can competently deal with all the tools hunters have and then some, and it leaves Rise feeling like an unbalanced experience that has no natural conclusion point. Allmother and Volstrax, as title update monsters that also have an obligation to wrap up the incomplete story, do not feel like conclusion points for the difficulty curve of the game. Even taking into account the free Proof of a Hero quests essentially, the difficulty and overall game progression still feels as if there is more to be done. Compare this again to Iceborne and Fatalis, who had 4 prior updates worth of build-up and progression leading up to him all the way from Shara, and might as well be the equivalent of a super boss a la Lingering Will from Kingdom Hearts 2. Not only did he have loads of build-up, not only is he an extremely challenging and rewarding fight that makes logical sense to have the most powerful gear in the game, but he also feels like a natural conclusion to the progression of Iceborne. Because, let's be honest, where else is there to go? Same goes for Base World 2 with the crossovers if we want to say I'm being unfair to Rise because Iceborne is a G-Rank game and Rise isn't. It had Joe, a fan favorite, Kolv, who was the player's first taste of a siege in World and was a major goal to all players, Lunastra, as a radically changed monster who hadn't been seen for a long time, and then the crossover mons who took elements from their respective games and the extremes which push all their mechanics to the limit. Hell, even the ATs for both World and Iceborne helped the progression, especially Nurg and Velk as farewells to both games. To continue onwards the curve of World, which basically ends with AT Nurg in the extremes, it required a full-on expansion into G-Rank. That's big. But what if I'm being unfair by comparing it to World? Alright, fine. How about base generations? Deviants and their 10 levels, elders such as Amatsu, hyper monsters, and then event quests after release that were special and buffed up monsters, even having some unique ones like Hyper Silver, Gold, Devil Joe, and Rajane. And before someone out there says to stop complaining because we will get a G-Rank expansion, says who? Who can confirm to me right now that there will be a G-Rank expansion with evidence? Because it feels like ever since the days of For You, as the first game the Western world got of the 4th generation, and not Base 4, that people have instantly been assuming that for every game since then, there will be a G-Rank equivalent, or that it will have even the same amount of content, which is a greatly flawed argument, just because of the fact that, le shock, Not every game in the series gets an ultimate expansion! Portable Third, a highly renowned title in the series and the best-selling installment prior to World and Iceborne, developed by the same team as Rise, did not get an ultimate expansion. Instead, it was Tri that got the ultimate expansion, with Portable Third monsters in the Misty Peaks area getting transferred over. A technicality, sure, but hey, the devil's in the details. Or how about the fact that Generations Ultimate wasn't even planned? Generations as is already had a fuck ton of content, with the largest roster of monsters yet and endgame grinds like the Deviants and Hypers to dedicate to. There was no intent on making an expansion. They didn't feel the need to. It wasn't until later where they decided to make an expansion. Sure, I hope for an ultimate expansion to Rise just as much as the next guy, but do I expect it to 100% happen? Do I bank the entirety of Rise's post-game reputation and criticism on the defense of, oh, just wait for the expansion that will for sure happen in a year? No, it isn't a reliable defense. It's an excuse under false pretense. Next up is probably a highly controversial opinion I'm going to spout, but here goes. I don't think Wyvern Ride is balanced in the slightest, and if brought back, needs to be nerfed massively. Wyvern Ride as an idea is really fun to toy around with. The idea of just temporarily taking control of a monster's moveset and using it to beat up another monster, all because of one bug's Superman strength silk. It is a really great feeling to take control of Magnamalo and use all those powerful moves and then end it off with the big bandit brainer. However, all too much like 4-use charge blade and mounting, it's too good. Except, I could say for mounting that it at least required the player's attention to quell the monster's resistance, and that despite how much you can make monsters like Gogmazios your bitch, it just resulted in a knockdown. At least with Charge Blade, there are still a few brain cells that were required to do that one chain input in order to get a red shield and then SAAD. Once you get that Wyvern Ride, however, you might as well throw away all those useless brain cells, because you won't be needing them. The novelty of Wyvern Ride wears off after the first 50 hours, when you realize just how broken it truly is, and it fucking sickens me. For an entire 60 seconds, you have complete control over a monster and what it does. You can boop a monster into a series of walls at a bare minimum of 3. You can harass other monsters and the potential quest target with a series of Wyvern Rides. And you can fucking throw the monster you're riding on into yet another after stealing its lunch money, chaining your first Wyvern Ride into yet another one. Which you can then decide on doing any of these processes all over again. And Wyvern Ride isn't just a small bit of damage resulting in a knockdown. No, you have the equivalent of portable Dragonators in your back pocket. Maximized use of the Wyvern Ride system through items like the Puppet Spider, powerful Silkbind moves that can practically cause an instant Wyvern Ride, and other monsters in the map can result in a third of the target's health being sent to the void. A fact that is proved even further with particularly strong Wyvern Rides like Regane, who not only do loads of damage, but also have ease of access to a fast, high priority, long range move that is easy to spam. Which leads me into a small sub-point that is somewhat tied with the example I just brought up. This is quite possibly the worst invader system ever. Remember the old days of Devil Joe in Try and Free Ultimate, where he could just come into your quest out of the blue, called out of nowhere by Kurapeko, or how he made his introduction by crushing a Great Jaggy, and you just had to deal with it? Remember the yesteryear of World Basilgoose and how he set a new standard for invader monsters, being able to appear in any environment, any quest in high rank, with not even a single sign or sound of him being in the area until it is too late, and how you had to deal with it? Well now, let's just have the invader monster of this game fucking sleeping on maps for the entire time, unless if it meets some requirement, and not harass you. Because yeah, I totally agree with a descendant of Nemesis from RE3 being the equivalent of an optional challenge that is out of your way. Oh sure, Basil is thrown into the mix from Update 2.0, and Volstrax 2 I suppose from 3.0, but even then there are problems here. Basil not being nearly as effective, much less frequent as he once was, and Volstrax as a surprise that can fuck you up if you don't notice the ambush notification, but also one that kind of helps you because it primarily targets the monster you've been fighting at that moment. More importantly, however, because of the Wyvern Ride system, these monsters that should remain prevalent threats in the quest that need to be dealt with or dispatched with can instead be turned into net positives to bully another monster. Regine and Volstrax especially fall victim to this, as Volstrax directly dive bombing into a monster can just result in a Wyvern Ride. Meanwhile, for some reason, Regine has one of the lowest tolerances to Wyvern Ride of any monster I've seen, able to be sleeping one moment and then instantly ridden without so much as a hassle. Fuck, even elders aren't safe from being made your whipping boys. The only ones that are safe are the serpents and the fucking alphas, which do make some sense within the context of Rampage, a tower defense mode with the alphas as wave leaders, but then immediately don't make any sense outside of it, where somehow they're just immune to it because... shut up. I guess alphas aren't like those beta cucks. The implementation of Wyvern Ride as a whole has a negative impact on the structure of the game and various other mechanics. One that emphasizes spectacle and how cool this idea might be, but without properly adjusting for things like balance. Rise is easier than any other monster game for many because of this, which is why I say it needs to be nerfed if anyone on the team does think it should return, or if there is a generic expansion. For as fun as Wyvern Ride is, I wouldn't trade it for the overall fun I'd much rather be having with the game itself. And now that I've mentioned them, there's no point in delaying this section any further down the line. So, might as well just pop those zits while we are here. Because make no mistake of it, alpha monsters, for the most part, are just diet deviants. The inspiration cannot be denied. The alphas are directly borrowing from many aspects of the infamous deviants, straight down to the same monsters, the same moves, the same idea, even the same look oftentimes, minus the special exception of we have scars all over PTSD and we angry. Outside of the feeling that, as a whole, I just much prefer if we had the actual deviants, thank you very much Stories 2, this direct inspiration often feels too integral to the identity of the alphas, almost restricting them, tying down the alphas from potentially being something unique and cool. When I'm fighting Alpha Arzuros, I'm not thinking of how cool this monster is, or what it's doing differently. No, I am thinking of how much this is exactly like Red Helm, beat for beat, making me associate and call him from that point onwards Blue Helm. When I'm fighting Alpha Rathian, I'm not intrigued at what new things could be done a la Goldian from Iceborne. I instead immediately know it is just going to be Dread Queen, with nothing new or substantial to it. When I'm fighting Alpha Diablos, I don't even try to act like I'm expecting something else. I expect it to be just Massacre, but worse. And guess what? I am correct in my hunches, because Alpha Diablos is just that, a worse Massacre. Presentation-wise, challenge-wise, you get the drill. This feeling gets especially frustrating when, in rare circumstances, there are individuals in this group that, by some miracle, feel actually different. Alpha Zinogre, Alpha Mizutsune, and even Alpha Rathalos, I will admit, bring something new to the table. Hence why I said, for the most part, earlier. These individuals still take some hints from their deviants, especially in areas like the design, but they change up the flow in varying bits. Alpha Rathalos actually taking a few hints from Iceborne Silver, using giant chain explosions in rows, as well as charged, explosive combo bites. Alpha Mizutsune with new movements and bubble formations, as well as a rad-as-hell design, and Alpha Zinogre as by far the most differing in his complexity and combo structure. A depth that might as well make him like a fighting game character, what with the various launchers he has to then combo into, power waves, and level 3 where he just goes ham. By themselves, I actually like these free variations, but because of their umbrella name and the standards set by the others, it feels maddening knowing that they can be better, can be more than just reminders of monsters we've already fought, but are perfectly fine with doing deviant fights too, Electric Boogaloo. Can I also just say how butt-fucking ugly these alphas are? With a color palette consisting of your typical brown and gray first-person shooters, unappealing textures, horrible glow effects, and an oversaturation of scars to make them stand out from everything else, these are legitimately some of the worst-looking things in the entire game. As an example, Rathian, while not as bad as our Generation 1 and 2 iteration, still makes me want to throw up in a barf bag, especially with the dripping poison texture on that tail, even if it is cut off. Or how about Diablos, who is the prime example of being unappealing as fuck with an oversaturation of scars and underwhelming as hell visual effects. Remember the terror you would have from Massacre and his steam explosions? Well, here it is again, except with all the bravado and emphasis as a wet fart. The boredom I get from most of these alphas is further accentuated when we talk about the big reward you get for facing these endgame tier threats. What? Thought you were gonna get new armor and weapon designs? Pfft, nah. How about only one unique material that is used for making and upgrading a single weapon tree? A weapon tree that, in my onion, has a really stupid, weak gimmick. Rampage weapons try to walk the same path as Safi's weapons, being able to customize them to unique specifications. Except it can't walk that walk, because in every way, shape, and form, the extent of modifying Rampage weapons is much more limited. Sure, depending on the Rampage weapon type, you can have perhaps a few special augments. But as a whole, you are limited to a saddening amount that generally are summarized as get a bit of attack, defense, or element. Get a surge of attack for not having element. More attack but less affinity. It's all so basic bitch. And despite putting in a ridiculous amount of funds, making an entire set surrounding this one Rampage Swax, putting thought into what I felt I wanted for the augments. Want to know what the end result was? I felt weak. I felt that all of that time and effort trying to see value in this system, trying to make the best out of it, ultimately left me with an end result that could have been satiated by any other weapon I had in my catalog, and better. After trying it twice, both in the Veterans Gala and Proof of Power, I just swapped the weapon to Magnum Molo's fully upgraded Switch Axe, and you know what? I was right. I felt way better with this basic weapon, but in the hands of a system that tries to stress itself as a make whatever you want. Which I feel is the worst kind of sensation someone can get when they spend a lot of time not even trying to optimize, but just make a set or weapon that they want to like, especially one that tries to make people experiment with it. By limiting itself to more controllable factors, bare bones aspects like attack, element, and defense, it strips away the charm of making some wonderfully unique sets to complement the system. But that all leads into a bigger can of worms I shall get into in due time. The alphas do nothing for themselves by trying to emulate the style of the deviants, and the Rampage weapon system does jack squat to make the alphas enticing to fight by being bare bones and unappealing. Which brings me to that namesake for the weapons, and yet another factor that, while its own thing, doesn't help the alphas in the slightest. Stop me if you heard this one before in the video. A new feature introduced to freshen up the gameplay that has the potential to be fun, but can end up being a mess most of the time that is horribly unbalanced. Yep, we are talking about Rampage for the moment. And I have got some, choice words for it. First though, let's get a disclaimer out of the way. As with anything multiplayer-centric in Monster Hunter, the personal enjoyment of Rampage can differ greatly depending on the players involved. Just like how Lao becomes that little bit more bearable with 3 other people, so too does Rampage. When it comes to Rampage, however, I want to focus more on the fundamental mechanics with the system and the issues involved with it outside of a multiplayer focus. So yeah, let's get started. Main issue that I think everyone can agree with? The presentation of Rampage is an absolute clusterfuck. Everything down to the UI, notifications, hunters on screen, party and health bars, weapon unique gimmicks, installations, and multitude of monsters that may be present at any one moment is a nightmare to comprehend. It is extremely easy, nay, common, to completely lose track of one thing or another because of a terrible design. A design that also at every opportunity it can get tries to grab your attention to any of the several things on the side. You need to set up installations throughout the area, both manual and automatic, to repel the monsters. Each monster has a different type within the Rampage, with certain types needing to be prioritized over others. So, while you are trying to target the Basarios crashing the gates, who are also some of the worst monsters in Rampage due to their hit zones, power, and surprising speed, you are also needing to anti-air any flying monsters that might be zoning you out, or keeping the corner of your eye peeled for the harassers, just in case if you need to guard against any incoming attack. But then you have the side quest screen on the side, telling you of all the challenges that can be accomplished within a Rampage, which can be as simple as setting down a certain number of installations to making sure that enough monsters are repelled using a specific installation, which only counts if it is that installation landing the final hit, to blighting monsters, and more. Then there are all the shinies that you're supposed to pick up, carrying exploding kunai or elemental bombs to put down. Then there are the helpers, which are treated as powerful tide turners that you should save until you need them. But then there are also helpers like Hanoa and Minoto, as well as Iori, that are only around for that one wave, so then it's also telling you, no, go use that specific hunter helper this turn, else it is gone. What? Then there are all the characters talking, side notifications, Dragonators, and splitting wyvern shots to use. Then there are the moments where the signal is activated and all of a sudden, go, 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 go! Get on the ground and start swinging your weapon to do some massive damage, which becomes complicated depending on the number of monsters around, especially if further up ahead. In which case, you then need to also multitask and use the turrets and installations to manage everything else, try to catch up and repel them, and then go back to the crowd you're dealing with. And then there are the wave alphas, which ramp up the clusterfuck by 11 by breaking through the gate, forcing a retreat to the second area, can call monsters to add to the mess, all while you're dealing with everything else already mentioned and more. If you don't have someone around to help guide you in the rampage, you might as well be considered a lost cause, even if you played through the super barebones village tutorial. Which is a really bad mindset that people can just fall into with how much of a garbage heap this mode is. Worst part I feel is that it doesn't even matter if you are doing it under multiplayer or solo, because either way, no matter how organized everything could be, sooner or later it turns into an absolute mess. A mess that doesn't even feel all that challenging to get through due to the layers of multitasking bullshit you have to put up with, and how there are no consequences, no limits to fainting. By the time I pull myself out of a solo Alpha Rathian rampage, do I even feel satisfied knowing that I might as well have been a floundering fish hitting up against a brick wall and somehow winning? No, that's not a good feeling from Monster Hunter at all. Rather than being a challenge through learning a monster and its patterns, knowing when best to attack and what spots to hit, you just simply win Rampage by being a stubborn bitch and repeatedly smashing your head against that wall until it just decides to give up. Just like Zora, you legitimately cannot lose to Rampage even if the gate is absolutely getting its shit kicked in twice over by an Alpha's super, unless you are just that unmotivated to even hit it. Which is a really bad situation to get a first impression of the Alphas from, knowing that whatever happens, you are just going to win, having to deal with everything around you, all while Alpha Rathalos does chain explosions reaching across the entire arena. And what is your main reward from all of this? Rampage tickets. Tickets that shall be used for ramping up and as sacrificial material for the talisman melding process. My favorite. Look, I know siege monsters are a tricky devil to make properly balanced, much less one that tries to be in an entire mode of quests for people to try out and perhaps vary the gameplay loop. But there are so many issues involved with Rampage that I'm just left with a feeling of thanks, I hate it. UI that could have been vastly simplified, objectives that could be reduced down on or just rid of, a penalty to dying like perhaps subtracting the clock by say 15 seconds exponentially like that of Duremudira. You get what I mean. People weren't motivated to do rampages back when alphas were limited to that game mode. And regardless of if this was planned by Capcom or in response to the outcry, we still don't give enough of a shit to bother with Rampage even with alphas not exclusive to it. Because what's the point? The portable team ended up making a self-defeating system with the Rampages, trying to be its own special unique thing to go to, only for that reason to be stripped away from it. A reason nobody wants to go through, leaving both the alphas and rampages as hollow inclusions with no reason to fight, nothing to live for. A reason that shall be fully explored in the next point. aka the big one. I know people might be sick of hearing others rant about it over and over again, but it has to be iterated to everyone just how awful the endgame of Rise is. Not exclusively to launch, not specifically to 2.0, or not even based on how the game is now, but as a whole. And it all revolves around this fucking melting pot! Words cannot describe the absolute void I feel inside of me, having to walk up to this damn cat, having to use materials to get the process going, then having to depart on a quest to come back to a charm that will ultimately be absolutely useless. Back when Rise first came out, the best materials to spend on the melding pot consisted of Narwa, a monster that, while had an absolutely fantastic fight, got absolutely shat on in every other department, leaving it as nothing more than sacrificial fodder. Which feels like a goddamn slap to my face for liking and having fun with this fight, only to be told that it is all pointless. Update 2.0 brought in the field of usable parts to the Elders and Basil, giving slightly more options to the RNG pots from Hell that still don't help all that much. Update 3.0 then decided to revert back to 1.0 of Rise for whatever reason, returning to only one monster being the go-to sacrificial lamb, Crimson Glow Volstrax and the Crimson Liquid. With the Crimson Liquid, there is no other reason to use anything else as fodder, because not only do they have a high amount of points per capita, but they are also extremely easy to get from Crimson Glow, offered up just about anywhere from him, even shinies in the end quest screen. Okay, but so what, I hear some of you saying. You don't have to fight Crimson Glow. You can fight any other monster or use just about anything else from a melding pot. Disregarding the fact that this hypothetical person completely ignored the facts already stated, there's the simple fact that I don't agree or like fighting monsters like Narwa, as already stated, just for another chance to roll the talisman dice. Even if the monster is like Crimson Glow, where the gear is worthwhile and it still is a fun fight, I think it is an extremely bad design decision to create a system where there is only one way to acquire this fundamental piece of set making for a bugged RNG system, and how every time I want to fill up the queue, I need to use all these materials, and if I don't have enough, well, fuck me, gotta go grind that monster some more! The novelty of fighting Crimson Glow for the umpteenth time wears off fast when I know I am just there for his fluids, at that point feeling like a chore. Yeah, sure, deviant grinding through all 10 levels wasn't the best, but at least I knew I was getting something I wanted out of it, one step closer to my goal of maxing out the armors or weapons. With the Melder, it is a goddamn slot machine that just ultimately leads back to once again fighting Crimson Glow for more of his fluid just to pathetically try again. And as previously mentioned, this shit is bugged. There is a well-known glitch for many in the game, where a hunter can be continually subjected to the same selection of shitty talismans over and over again from within their table, never being able to get what they want, all on top of the fact that the allocation of skill grades and slots on these talismans are equated to dice rolls, and how not all tables are created equal. Personally speaking, I don't give a flying fuck about the best options, and am perfectly content with not having what is deemed as meta. However, this is still a gigantic dick move for those who do care about making the best build for speedrunning, or for the simple feeling of wanting to be powerful. And even if I am fine with not having the best, it is still a gigantic pain in the ass to get remotely good charms for the set idea I want to try out. So, let me get this straight. You restrict an important, valuable piece of set building to only one singular method that requires the hunter to build stockpiles of monster parts, only to have to fill up a queue that's only there to waste time by forcing you on another quest, all for the prize reward of random bugged talismans that can keep looping the same bad ones from a table over and over again, thereby forcing you to go back to building up even more stockpiles? Are you out of your goddamn mind? It is for that reason alone that, in all honesty, I vastly prefer World and Iceborne's endgame of tempered monsters and decorations. Sure, it had some weak points, and if you were after the sacred group of decos like Attack Up, then yeah, it would start to get to you. But at least it wasn't just the single method from the Melder. A large portion of the decorations you got was just from playing the game. The Melder existed there purely to dump some useless decos you either didn't use or had a large supply of, potentially turning them into decorations that could be of a higher value to you. It wasn't the only way. More importantly, I could play the fucking game how I please and still get rewarded. If I wanted to fight a Savage Joe out of the blue because I find his fight fun, I could do that and get decorations from the end screen, plus anything else I needed like his crook via investigation. If I wanted to fight a Tempered or Arc-Tempered because, oh hey, AT Velkhana has a neat fight, good gear, and beautiful Son, then I had the pleasure to while getting decorations. Fucking hell! There are even special event quests that either gave higher chances for better rarity decos as well as other items, or just straight up other options. Do everything in the Witcher quest to get a free attack jewel. Fight against a Greatest Jagras to pick up a load of decorations from its barf, all while being a fun meme fight. Fight against a Tempered Furious, not only for loads of money, but also for special prints to turn into the Melder for some high rarity decos. All of this, plus the addition of tier 4 decos in Iceborne, allowed for lots of user customizability as well as freedom to the player. With time, you can build up a large amount of decorations, even some great ones for the set you want to make. None of this bullshit of building up item stockpiles to even make talismans. Sure, many can argue that this is such a small detail to get hung up over, but as the old saying goes, the devil is in the details. And it is this devil that can often make or break the endgame loop for many, myself included, just through one or more extra steps to the process. Want to know another reason I prefer World and Iceborne to Rise? The gear. More specifically, the roles armors are forced to abide by, and the way skills are allocated or just straight up changed. This all sounds confusing, but let me explain. Technically speaking, yes, armors even before now had select roles based on the monster it came from. Zinogre armor has always had a focus around lane power, tying back into the idea of growing stronger through its rage and charged mode. Nargacuga armor has always had a motif around evasion, stealth, and crit eye, so it gives you skills such as evasion and evade window. Glavenus armor had a focus around sharpness, Astalos around raking up crits through continuous fast strikes, armors with power prolongers, crit draw, etc. However, there are some changes from generations onward to take note of. Back in the older Monster Hunters, armors were split into Blademaster and Gunner variations, corresponding to the respective weapon types and changing up certain attributes. Use a Blademaster weapon, use the Blademaster version of an armor you like. Same with Gunners. You weren't negated from wanting to use the full armor set of, say, Legiacris just because it had guard on it. You could still use it for other reasons and gem in other things. In World, the armor system was changed from Blademaster and Gunners to Alpha and Beta, along with an overhaul to the way skills worked. Alphas provided more skills at base, but less customizability if you wanted it for a mixed set. Betas, meanwhile, traded off certain points on the armor for better deco slots, making these versions the perfect for making your own custom set. Coming back to the overall point, you weren't negated from using Volker Anjanath's set if you wanted to, just because it had special ammo boost on the legs. Because not only could the alpha give more points overall to the skills that matter to you, plus decos, but also because there was the beta, an option that removed some of the skills on the set for the viability of more customization. And thanks to the way in which certain skills work, you could have a single set be viable for both Blademaster and Gunners. Blademaster using Xeno Armor? Razor Sharp. Gunner using Xeno Armor? Then the skill changes to its other half of Spare Shot. With the Alpha and Beta system, as well as the introduction of Gamma Armors, World and Iceborne allowed for the greatest variety in set making the main series still knows, and the limits me and other people pushed beyond were absolutely ridiculous. It was plausible, and, more importantly, extremely fun to make a set with 3 set bonuses at once through something like 2 two-piece bonuses like Fatalis Inheritance and Ruiner Nurg Ambition, and then a Kolv Kajar weapon on the side with Guts or Critical Element, or 4-piece Velkhana Frostcraft thanks to a Safajiva weapon with 1 bit of Frostfang Punish Draw, leaving room for 1 extra thing if I so wish. Rise? Well, Rise once again tries to have its cake and eat it too. Badly. For the 2nd time in a row, we undergo yet another system change involving armor and skills, attempting to be a mix between the old games' Blademaster and Gunner system and World's point allocation. Except, no wait, I should scrub either Blademaster or Gunner out of the equation, because Rise pulls a decision so astronomically boneheaded, I have no damn clue how it was accepted. To illustrate my point, let's talk about Rachna Kadaki, huh? Huge non sequitur, I know, but Rachna's a very fun fight. I feel Rachna is potentially one of the best monsters in the game, offering up an extremely unique fight and concept with interesting mechanics throughout. The babies, web pulling, ceiling hopping, extendo neck, use of fire, bandage cycle, and even web cutting are all really neat ideas the fight offers up. I liked Rachna Kadaki a lot, and thus wanted to make its armor not just because I like it, but also to have some variety for once. We all have our good reliables in the campaigns of these games, but after so many times we start to crave a little something new. And so I head to the smithy, look at the armor, and am immediately denied from this need. Rachna Kadaki is exclusively a Gunner armor. Without the existence of alternate versions like Alpha and Beta to add some more customization to the game, or even Blademaster and Gunner for the 2 classes, armors in Rise are stuck to the roles assigned for them, permanently. Other monsters like Tetranodon also suffer from this syndrome, with some like Diablo suddenly being in roles they weren't prior, like being a lance set because, shut up, he's gotta be it. There aren't any other monsters that could fit it. Other armors like Kushala trigger that small bit of OCD in my brain with its mess of a skill list in order. Seeing both handicraft as well as pierce and normal up on the same set. Just knowing that regardless of if I use a blade or a gun, I'm still going to be seeing skills that are just being wasted away. The answer was right fucking there with that Xeno armor example I brought up earlier. Why the hell not? I wouldn't have even minded going back to Blademaster and Gunner, just because of this frustrating as hell inconvenience. And that's not mentioning shit like the goddamn Serpents' armor, which dear fucking lord, Portable Team, did you really have to make them that confusing to figure out? Could you not have just simply stated in the soul descriptions which serpent armor it works with, rather than leaving us to guess? Could you not have picked out better skill selections for each respective armor that doesn't make it feel like the team was just throwing darts on a board to decide what goes to what? Like, oh yes, Focus, Evade Extender, Slugger, Guard Up, Guard, Constitution, and Stamina Surge on one set? With only 1 point for all of these? Without deco slots? What weapons are these meant for if used as a full set? Could you not have given better bonuses to these weapons once people did figure out what you needed to do? Narwa's armor gives defense as the only bonus. Defense? And could you not perhaps postpone the true potential of these armors and weapons to the game's last title update? It's a big enough crime as is, COVID excuse or no, for the game to come out without an ending or final boss. So why do you just have to make it worse? Even with these pieces being maxed out with all other scales, the reward still isn't worth it considering all the time and funds spent into something that ultimately you could just make better from anything else around that point. If you could. All these issues are further compounded when we have armors, weapons, and ramp-up skills like that of the Serpents, requiring a very specific setup to even work that ultimately restricts the customizability of the game even further. If you want to use, say, a Magnamalo weapon with the Soul skill without trading it off, well, you gotta use that armor or something else that might have Hellfire on it, and to a high enough level. If it is a skill like Kushala that's just too good to pass up, then that is only going to be truly effective against monsters weak to the ice element due to how the weapons that benefit the most from this are those with high element. Anti-aquatics, anti-aerials, Thunderblight exploits, all of that. And the cherry at the top of the shit sundae that ruins it all for me? Decorations and skills. Decorations, due to the materials required for some, the money issues of the game, and sometimes even changed size, can be unreasonably hard to obtain for no apparent reason. Attack being a size 2 and requiring Blood Run Jewels, Regine Black Fur, Gossclaw Plus, and a Magnamalo plate. Hellfire, just in case you wanted to put that on a set without being Magnas. Size 3, Lazarite Jewel, Magna Soul Prism, Rathalos Scale Plus, and a Rachna Glowgut. Fate, Size 3, Camellios Parts, Lazarite Jewel, and an Almudron Orb. Handicraft, pretty simple skill, yeah? Well, size 3 fucko. Oh, and you need Deora Scale and Horns, Lazarite Jewels, and a Magnamalo Orb. Master's Touch, Size 2, Lazarite Jewel, Teostra Mane and Scales, and a Gosharag Bile. Critical Boost, Size 2, Lazarite Jewel, Apex Blaze Sack, Magna Horn Plus, and an Almudron Plate. You get the deal. Even some of the lower ones can be surprising in terms of just what is required out of them and how hard it could be to get. And if you do get those decorations, well, good luck trying to find good slottage on any armor basically. Kulu forbid if you are actively looking for a few 2 slots throughout and the practically extinct freeze. This right here is yet another reason why the mixed set building brought up earlier for the Rampage Swax turned out so unfun and unrewarding. Because not only did I feel gypped out of the time I put into the Switch Axe, but I also felt annoyed by how troublesome it was to get the decos, armors, and skills that I desired, only to then think it all over again because, well shit, that's a Rarity 2 deco, boyo! Compared to Iceborne, which truly felt like the sky was the limit, where I was more than happy to spend some time on the absurdity of the set I was making, or even the carefully thought over, considerate balancing of negative and positive points of the older games, and I felt shackled in Rise. The grind to try and get those rare free percent drops for our handicraft decoration, for an attack decoration, making an entire set beforehand, even after the existential pain of 2 and 3 slot decos, getting all of the armor pieces you wanted for perhaps a slugger set, only to be given the hard fuck you because, oh hey, you may have just gotten a talisman from the clutches of Satan that, due to its points and slots, just might have made all those armor pieces irrelevant. Sorry, start over from scratch. God fucking damn it! It is so asininely frustrating just how important talismans are in making a good or even a great set, with how bugged the system and loop is. The endgame, more than anything else, more than the hollow story, more than the difficulty curve and abrupt stop it has, more than the game-breaking wyvern ride, more than the absolute joke that are invaders now, more than the generally bland and criminally bankrupt alphas, more than the garbage heap that is the Rampage game mode and mechanics, is why I legitimately dread going back to Rise. A dread so all-encompassing that everything else practically gets overshadowed. Talk about a final act, eh? Let's just get to the conclusion. If there is anything I want the audience to know, more than everything else, regardless of the tone and what I may have said throughout the video, is that none of this was done out of malice. Once again, I love Monster Hunter. I don't like parading around my time with the franchise like it's a measuring contest for others, but this franchise has been with me for over 10 years by this point. I have played every mainline game that came out in the West since Tri, spent what little time I had left to play Frontier before it was gone, bought all forms of merchandise dedicated to it, up to and including art books like Dive to World, and the collector's edition of Monster Hunter World, Nurg statue, box, book, and all. I dedicated a large portion of my identity, my channel, to this singular franchise. This property means a lot to me. But when you've been with something for this long, you really start to care about the fundamental and mechanical aspects of it. And what I see here, objectively, cannot be ignored. While I do truly feel sorry for the people over at Capcom who suffered from the data breach as well as the COVID pandemic, what matters to me, and more importantly, history, is the game itself. Despite everything I have said, Monster Hunter Rise is a perfectly fine Monster Hunter game, with a lot of qualities to it that make it worth playing just by itself. The gameplay, monster roster, controls, areas, and movement are the best yet in the main series, providing a lot of joy and fun throughout. Playing the game is a blast, for sure, and for many, that's all that matters. Without calling anyone out, many will argue amidst the turmoil the idea of playing the game just for fun. If the gameplay is so strong, then why don't people just play solely for it? After all, on the surface, it seems childish to get hung up about these event quests and dismiss the game as bad when other games have also released event quests in the past. If this was me from about 2017 to 2018, then yeah, I would have wholeheartedly agreed with the sentiment. However, there is more to the topic than just that. Call it age, or experience, or whatever. But I've come to realize over time that while fun is the experience I strive for in any game, the idea of fun for the sake of it is an unrealistic notion for the reason that there are factors that can affect it. Gameplay mechanics, enemies, story, systems, and more can all change the enjoyment we have. What's the point of trying to have fun When you know deep down that even with strong gameplay, the experience as a whole, through the other factors combined into it, feels empty. Well, you get something like Rise, personally. I want it to be known that I did not rush through Rise. I didn't go through it every hour of every day trying to blitz by without taking in anything. I did not try to get to the final boss as fast as possible for the sake of content, to be the first one on board the train. I took my time. It took until April 16th for me and my crew to get to Narwa and defeat her. I took breaks whenever I could, primarily for other things like editing or even just giving myself some time. I took a minimalist approach to Rise on and off camera, not wanting to get exhausted with it like I did for Ultimate. And yet, here I am, only having about 200 hours into the game, with everything wrapped up at the same conclusion. The difference is, For You took nearly 1,000 hours in the span of years before I felt this. Just goes to show how much the systems in Rise absolutely killed my interest, I guess. I don't like feeling this, but as it stands, unless I have to absolutely go back for the sake of something like footage, I have no interest in returning to Rise anytime soon. No interest in sitting around for some more godforsaken talisman or crimson liquid grinds. No interest in some unknowable goal left to strive for. No interest in any of the other achievements left. No interest in the special Rampage game mode. And certainly no interest in the event quests they're pushing out. You really try to once again mix world and pre-world by drip feeding us these quests once a week without giving it an active incentive to do it right then and there because it's up forever and it's just downloaded for whenever, all without giving rewards that might even be worth the player's time? Not even anything interesting in the quest itself? Even though there are plenty of rewards you could give out in these events, you instead sell them on the eShop for bogus prices? All while highlighting the amount of visual customization Rise offers, locking layered pieces individually just for that extra bit of money? I would try to be even angrier with this game, but it is all but dried out. And even if there are title updates to this game, or a generic expansion, promising to fix the endgame or the content issues by giving us more quests and monsters, I don't think that will be enough. Creating a lake that's the widest in the world doesn't matter when its depth is a few inches deep, and has some hills jutting out of the water. Giving more quests and monsters to Rise won't automatically guarantee improvements with the deeper, fundamental issues of the game. If they want my interest in Rise, Rising, or whatever the hell it will be called, then they're gonna have to do a lot more. Ultimately, I think the main deciding factor for how you'll feel about Rise is whether or not you are willing to put up with all the problems it might have for everything you do like. Because if you truly can push past something like the lack of an endgame or the difficulty curve, then yeah, Rise is a pretty good game. Nothing wrong with trying it out due to its accessibility and portability on the Switch, and all the more power to those of you who do truly enjoy it. But as it stands, and for the foreseeable future, Rise is very much like the Legend of Icarus. A game with so many ambitions and ideas to it that it soared too close to the sun, only to fall to the waters below.